Hello there, and welcome. Wherever you are, and however your day has been, I'm glad you found your way here. This is a quiet corner of the internet, made just for slowing down. Tonight, or perhaps it's morning where you are, we'll drift together into the soft folds of the past, not through textbooks or timelines, but through gentle storytelling, the kind that wraps around you like a worn shawl and carries you, unhurried, through forgotten places and moments. Our journey won't demand anything of you. You don't need to learn, or remember, or stay awake at all. Just let the words settle around you. The story will do the rest. If you find comfort in this kind of calm exploration, you're most welcome to like or subscribe, only if it feels right. And if you feel like sharing, I'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is there. It's always a quiet wonder to imagine people across the world sharing this moment together in their own cozy corners. So now's the time to make a warm drink, dim the lights, maybe lie back under your favorite blanket. Let your shoulders soften, let your breath deepen, let the noise of the day begin to fade. And whenever you're ready, I'll begin our story. The mist is still clinging to the woven thatch of your sleeping mat when you open your eyes. Thin lines of sunlight creep through the palm leaf screen above the doorway, tracing slow, golden strokes across the floor of red earth. The morning air is cool but beginning to shift, softening under the breath of a sun that is not yet harsh, but already watchful. You sit up slowly, brushing specks of millet husk from your skin. Outside, the village has begun to move. Wooden mortars thump steadily against yam, and a soft clatter of calabash bowls tells you that the first meal is being stirred over fires still new with flame. You can smell the smoky sharpness of burning Irako bark and something sweet, perhaps the fried batter of akara cakes, perhaps the faint memory of dried figs soaked in palm oil. You've only lived in Omu for 3 planting seasons now. Before that, you belonged to the road. You carried salt in tightly woven pouches and walked the trails from forest edge to river mouth, watching the canopy change as dialects shifted and cloth patterns grew stranger. You remember the ache in your feet, the looseness in your ribs from too many nights without hot food. You remember the rain, always the rain. Now you are still a potter's apprentice, a maker of simple vessels, and sometimes, when the day is kind, a shaper of bells. You stand, lifting the door reed aside. Morning greets you like an old friend, barefoot and quiet, carrying a calabash of warm water. The courtyard is cool beneath your toes, scattered with cassava peelings and dampened footprints. A few steps away, under the low awning of the family shelter, your elder sister bends over the fire, stirring beans with one hand while the other rests on her hip. Her baby sleeps in a sling across her back. The child's breath rises and falls against her shoulder, tiny and perfect. She glances toward you and lifts her chin. You overslept. You smile and say nothing. She means it kindly. You always sleep deeply when the wind is from the east. It carries the scent of river mud and leaf smoke, both of which remind you, for reasons you never fully understand, of your mother's singing. You kneel beside the water basin and wash your face slowly. The water is still warm from the clay jar where it sat all night. You let your palms rest against your cheeks, letting the stillness linger. You're not in a hurry. Clay waits for no one, but it also doesn't run away. From the back of the compound, beyond the garden plot where banana trees stretch upward like dancers, you hear Baba Ode's voice calling. His tone is flat, almost amused. He's been your teacher since you arrived in Omu. Half potter, half storyteller. He wears a string of cowrie shells around one wrist and smokes from a pipe so long and thin it looks like a reed plucked from a drum. You dry your hands and rise. Today is a good day to shape lids. Small ones, fitted tight, for the palm wine traders who will be passing through on their way to Oyo. Baba Ode likes you to start simple before your fingers wander into curves and elegance. You don't mind. Even the simple things need rhythm. As you step out of the courtyard, the village opens gently around you. The houses are close, round or square, all built from the same patient earth, reddish-brown, dimpled with age and sunlight. Thatched roofs rustle as the wind stirs. Smoke curls upward in calm spirals from 3 stone hearths. A young girl carries a bundle of firewood on her head, arms raised lightly for balance, feet silent as river fish on the packed dirt. Someone is singing. It's not a song you know well, just a lull of vowels rising and falling, a grain-pounding rhythm to keep the hands moving. It blends into the other morning sounds, the low grunt of goats, the scrape of stone on clay, the distant thud of pestle and mortar. You pass the shrine at the edge of the compound, where 3 polished stones sit beneath a bowl of water and a coil of white cloth. You lower your head slightly as you walk by. You're not sure if you believe everything Baba tells you, but you've learned not to disrespect the spaces others keep sacred. His workshop is down by the stream, just beyond the grove where the Irako trees stand tall and unbothered. Their trunks are wide, their shadows long even in morning light. The path to the grove is lined with cassia and flowering shrubs that smell faintly of citrus. There's a breeze today, steady and clean, ruffling the hems of your wrapper and carrying the cool scent of water mixed with wood smoke and sun-warmed clay. You find Baba sitting cross-legged on a stool, a lump of clay in his palm and another on the board before him. He doesn't look up when you arrive. Instead, he says softly, "Show me how the earth moves." It is one of his phrases. He likes to test you with riddles wrapped in metaphors. You kneel on the mat beside him and reach for the bowl of water. The clay is still moist from yesterday's soak. You press your fingers into it gently, shaping it into a coil, then a flattened disc, then a shallow dome. He watches without speaking. Around you, the workshop murmurs with quiet. The birds are louder than the people. A squirrel darts across the rafter beam overhead. The coals from yesterday's kiln are still warm beneath the ash, and the air smells like rain-soaked earth baked too quickly in fire. He finally speaks again, his voice slow and low. You have to listen to it. The clay knows what it wants to be. You nod, though you're not sure if that's entirely true. Still, you press your thumb to the rim of the lid and ease it wider. You've learned that some things only make sense when your hands are moving. Later, as the sun climbs higher, its light turns yellow gold and begins to gather in quiet pools at the edges of things. You pause to drink water from a gourd, the coolness sharp and welcome on your tongue. Baba hums a melody as he works, his rhythm slower now, like someone remembering something from far away. 2 children pass by the grove, laughing over something you can't see. One carries a palm frond shaped into a fan, the other a calabash covered in wax designs. They wave at you, and you lift your hand and reply, "Do you miss the road?" Baba would ask suddenly. You glance up, surprised. His eyes are still on the clay, but you know he's asking in earnest. You take a moment before answering. Sometimes, but the stillness here, it holds me. He nods and says nothing more. By midday, your fingers are coated in dry slip, and the lids have been laid out in a line along the shaded bench. They'll dry slowly over the afternoon, and tomorrow you'll polish them with river pebbles until they shine. You step outside the workshop and stretch. The sun is overhead now, and the grove hums with heat. Even the birds have quieted. You sit under the nearest tree and rest your back against the bark. Its texture is rough and familiar, and the air smells of sap and drying leaves. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but simply to pause, to let the weight of the morning settle around you like a loose cloth. Somewhere upstream, someone is washing clothes, the rhythm of the splash as gentle as breath. You feel the clay dust in your palms, the ache in your knees from sitting, the coolness of the shadow against your skin. You feel the nearness of the earth, not just beneath you, but within you. This is not the life you expected when you first arrived in Omu, but it is the life that has taken root, and for now that is enough. You remain there, still and listening, as the day begins to lean softly toward its middle. The leaves whisper above your head. A bell rings once, far in the distance. You do not move. Not yet. The sun, now full and round in the pale blue sky, casts long fingers of light through the branches above you. The warmth has deepened. It moves across your arms like water that has forgotten how to cool. The shade of the Irako tree still holds, but even it feels thinner, as if the leaves have softened their hold on the air. You rise slowly from the tree trunk, brushing the clay dust from your wrapper. The lids you shaped this morning sit patiently beneath the lean thatch awning. Their rims are beginning to turn pale at the edges where the sun reaches. Baba Ode is asleep on his stool, chin pressed against his chest, pipe still tucked in his hand. His snores are soft and steady, like the distant rustle of dry leaves on the wind. You don't disturb him. He's older now. His mornings burn brightly, but his afternoons often drift into quiet slumber. That is the way of things. You step out of the grove with quiet feet. The village is quieter than before. The loud work has stopped for now. Mortars rest in the corners of courtyards. The goats have curled beneath walls. The air smells of ash and bean broth, sun-warmed earth, and the thick, green scent of banana leaves. A woman is rinsing cassava peels in a wooden basin beneath the eaves of her hut. She hums softly, her voice moving in time with her hands. The sound lingers in the air like perfume. You walk back toward the compound, feet pressing gently into the warm dust. The village seems to exhale in the stillness of the early afternoon, as if every breath is drawn a little slower. In this heat, even the flies hum more gently. At the edge of the compound, your sister is fanning her baby with the folded palm frond. The child sleeps on a folded cloth in the shade of a calabash tree. A small pot of stew simmers nearby. You can smell the adri, pungent and fermented, mingling with the sharp brightness of ground pepper and the rich red depth of palm oil. It is the smell of comfort and of home. She looks up as you approach. "I saved some pounded yam," she says. You smile and sit beside her in the shade. She lifts a gourd bowl and places it between you. The yam is soft and warm, shaped into round, smooth lumps. She spoons a goosey stew over the top, thick with melon seeds and bits of smoked fish. The oil glistens in the sun, catching on your fingers as you tear a piece and dip it. The food is quiet in your mouth, earthy, soft, and slightly bitter from the leaves. You chew slowly, watching the dust drift lazily through the air. Across the courtyard, two boys are carving a toy boat from a piece of palm wood. They take turns holding the blade, laughing when one slips and nearly loses the shape. You remember being that age. You remember trying to shape things with your hands before you understood their purpose. After the meal, you sit with your sister a while longer. The baby stirs, yawns, then settles again. Your sister leans her head against the wall, eyes closed but not asleep. She has a strength you admire. Her days begin before yours and often end long after. Yet she never seems rushed. She has learned to move with the rhythm of the sun, not ahead of it. You rise quietly, feeling the heaviness of food in your belly and the gentle pull of the afternoon. It is too warm now to return to the kiln. The fire would feel too close, too loud. You decide to walk to the river. The trail is dry and dusty, winding gently past fields of okra and maize. You pass two older women carrying baskets of shea nuts on their heads, their feet moving with practiced ease. They greet you softly, and you reply with respect. Always respect. The elders carry time in their bones. The path narrows as it approaches the trees. You step over roots and fallen pods. The sound changes here. The wind becomes softer, broken by leaves. The air is cooler, laced with the smell of wet bark and mossy stone. Then you see it, the river, slow, wide, and brown, with eddies near the banks and patches of water lilies drifting near the shallows. You walk to the edge and crouch down. The water is cool against your fingers. A heron watches you from a rock upstream, still and tall, neck curved like a question. You stay there, breathing. There is no need to do anything. The river does not ask. It offers presence, not purpose. A voice calls softly behind you. I thought I'd find you here. You turn to see Ade, one of the dye makers. His hands are stained the color of twilight, deep indigo that no water can wash clean. He walks with a quiet confidence, a reed mat slung over his shoulder. He nods toward the river. I can't sew cloth, he says, but I'll wait. You smile and stand. Together you walk to the spot where the water slows. He unrolls the cloth, woven earlier in the week, a simple pattern of white and blue. He lays it gently on the water. It darkens as it soaks, the fibers softening and shifting. The indigo swirls around it like smoke caught in water. He crouches beside it, one hand resting on his knee. I like this part, he says. The waiting. You nod. It reminds you the cloth is alive. He glances at you with quiet surprise. Then he smiles. You are beginning to sound like an old man. You laugh gently, the sound catching in your chest. It's not the first time someone has said that to you. Baba Ode calls you young elder when you get too quiet. You sit together beneath the shade of a fig tree. A squirrel darts across a nearby branch, its tail flicking with agitation. You listen to the hum of insects, the gentle slap of the river against the bank, the occasional creak of a distant tree. Sometimes I wonder if I chose the right craft, Ade says after a while. You glance at his hands. Your cloths are beautiful. He nods, but his gaze stays on the river. Yes, but sometimes I wonder if I should have worked with stone, or music, or farming, something with roots. You don't answer right away. Instead, you let the silence stretch. Then you say, maybe the river feels the same. Maybe it wonders what it would be like to stay in one place. He turns to you, surprised again. Then he nods. I suppose we all carry something. You sit there for a while longer. The cloth darkens in the water. The sun begins its slow arc toward the west, and the light turns softer, deeper. A breeze rises from the south, bringing with it the scent of charcoal and ripening fruit. Eventually, Ade lifts the cloth from the river, wrings it gently, and folds it over his mat. You stand as well, stretching your limbs. He nods toward the village. Shall we walk back? You nod. The return is unhurried. The path is golden now, dust lit from behind. You pass the shrine again. 3 stones, still in their bowl. Someone has placed a small piece of cola, nut beside them. The village is awake once more. Children chase one another between huts. The smell of roasting maize drifts through the air. Somewhere a flute is playing. You follow the sound until you reach the compound. Your sister is laughing with one of the neighbor women, baby now cradled in her lap, wide-eyed and alert. The boy across the courtyard has finished his wooden boat. He tests it in a basin of water, watching as it bobs and leans. You sit beneath the awning and close your eyes, not from weariness, but from fullness. Your hands still smell of clay. Your feet are dusted with riverbank and forest leaf. You have spoken little, but the day has said enough. The world turns slowly here. It does not chase you. It gathers you gently, 1 hour at a time. Above, the wind stirs the palm fronds again. The clay bells you strung weeks ago beneath the rafters sway slightly, their hollow bodies catching the late sun. They do not ring unless the wind is just right. Today they are quiet. You lean back, resting your head against the warm clay of the wall. Your breath slows. The day is not yet done, but for now you rest. The sun tilts lower in the sky now, casting its light sideways through the village, where dust glows like copper, and the walls of every house seem to breathe with warmth. You sit quietly beneath the awning, your head still resting against the soft curve of the clay wall. A dry breeze moves through the courtyard, curling around ankles and lifting the scent of roasted maize, wood smoke, and ripe guava from the garden beyond. It is the hour when time seems to stretch, when shadows grow long but the light lingers. The goats begin to stir again, stretching their limbs and blinking against the brightness. From a nearby doorway, an old man coughs once, then sighs. You recognize his voice. It's Papa Adedeji, the neighbor who used to be a drummer, back when his hands were younger and steadier. Some afternoons, if the weather is soft, he will hum the rhythms of praise songs he once performed for weddings and naming ceremonies. His voice is low now, more breath and tone, but still wrapped in music. Your sister's voice floats to you, warm and amused. Will you sleep again so soon? You open your eyes and smile. She is teasing, but not unkindly. She hands you a folded cloth and points toward the garden path. I need more bitter leaf. Can you bring some? The stew is too gentle without it. You take the cloth and nod. The basket is already waiting by the edge of the garden fence, its bottom woven tight from raffia and bark. You pick it up, feeling the warm smoothness of the handle in your palm, and begin to walk slowly down the path. The garden lies just beyond the edge of the compound, fenced with woven branches and clay posts, marked by hanging calabashes tied with cower strings to ward off birds. The soil here is dark and forgiving. Rows of cassava, yam, okra, and pepper grow in soft curves across the ground. The bitter leaf stands in the far corner, its dark green leaves heavy with the last of the afternoon heat. You walk among the plants gently, careful not to brush too hard against the vines. The air smells of sun-warmed greenery, the kind of scent that clings to your fingers long after you've left. A grasshopper leaps across your path, clicking its wings once before vanishing into the undergrowth. In the distance, a woman calls out to her daughter, and a rooster responds with a voice too proud for his size. You begin to pluck the bitter leaf, choosing the older leaves that have grown wide and deep in color. Their edges are coarse, and their smell is sharp and earthy, with a bitterness that seems to rise from the root itself. As you gather them, your mind drifts. You think of the river again, of Ade and the cloth he soaked. You wonder how it looks now, drying beneath his awning, stretched tight between two wooden posts. You wonder if the indigo has darkened with the sun, or if the wind has pulled the fibers crooked. You wonder if he's still thinking about stone. The basket fills slowly, leaf by leaf. You add a few sprigs of scent leaf as well, knowing your sister will smile when she finds them in the stew. She always says scent leaf reminds her of your mother's broth, the one she used to make during the harmattan when everything tasted drier and the air stung your nose. As you turn to walk back, you notice the sun has dipped lower still. Its light is no longer overhead, but pouring sideways through the trees, catching the dust and turning it gold. The sky is changing, too, from the flat brightness of midday to the slow blooming of dusk. The edges of the clouds are tinged with orange, and the air has taken on a gentle hush. Back at the compound, your sister receives the leaves with a nod and a soft thank you. She doesn't stop stirring the pot, but tosses the leaves in with practiced ease, her movements fluid and unhurried. The scent rises almost instantly, rich, deep, familiar. You sit on the stool near the fire, not to help, but just to be near. The baby is awake now, gurgling softly in a sling across her back. His small hands reach toward the flames, not with fear, but with fascination. Your sister catches one hand and kisses it gently, then tucks it beneath the cloth again. The sky darkens in slow degrees. The sun disappears behind the tree line, and the color of the world begins to shift. The reds deepen, the yellows soften, the shadows stretch longer, folding the village gently into the arms of evening. Somewhere down the lane, a group of boys return from a forest path, carrying bundles of dry wood. Their laughter is loud at first, then quiets as they enter the compound. One of them is your cousin, Teyo, always quick to smile and quicker to argue. He nods at you as he passes, balancing his bundle easily on one shoulder. Soon, fires begin to bloom around the village like small suns. Their smoke rises slowly into the dusky sky, curling into shapes that vanish before they can be named. The scent of food is everywhere now. Yam, beans, spicy stew, grilled fish wrapped in leaves. The village is alive with quiet energy. The last work of the day moving toward rest. You leave the compound again, walking to Baba Ode's workshop to check the lids. The path is darker now, but your feet know the way. The air has cooled, carrying with it the faint scent of water, charcoal, and pressed earth. You hear the distant beat of a drum. Just one, slow and steady, marking time as the sky shifts from dusk to dark. When you reach the grove, the lids are where you left them. Their surfaces are pale and dry, ready for smoothing in the morning. You kneel beside them, running a finger across the rim of one. It is slightly uneven. You make a note to fix it. Behind you, the trees rustle gently. A fruit bat passes overhead, its wings stirring the air like soft cloth. You remain still, watching the last sliver of sunlight fade from the western edge of the sky. The first star appears, faint but steady, followed by another. Then, you hear Baba Ode's voice behind you. "Evening suits the clay," he says. You turn and see him standing near the kiln, wrapped in a light shawl, pipe tucked behind his ear. His eyes are soft, almost amused. You nod. It's quieter now. He walks toward the lids, crouches beside you, and runs a calloused thumb along one rim. "Good work," he says. "They'll hold." You smile, and he lowers himself onto his stool with a grunt. "The day moves like a wheel," he says. "Morning carries the body. Evening carries the soul." You sit beside him in silence, letting his words rest between you. He lights his pipe. The scent of the herbs he smokes is sweet and sharp. It mingles with the smoke from distant cooking fires and the dampness of the approaching night. "I once made a bowl so thin," he says, after a while. "It cracked when I breathed on it, not from weakness, but because the air itself wanted it." You turn toward him, curious. "What did you do?" He smiles. "I let it go. Not everything is meant to stay." You nod. The fire crackles gently, casting shadows that dance along the trees. The village behind you is quieter now. Voices have dropped to murmurs. Children are being called home. Lanterns are being lit. Eventually, Baba Ode stands, stretching his arms with a slow groan. "Go rest," he says. "Tomorrow we polish." You rise and follow the path back to the compound, your steps slow and easy. The sky is deep blue now, dotted with stars. The moon is still low, not yet bright, but enough to guide your way. The leaves above rustle softly in the breeze. Crickets sing in rhythmic pulses. Somewhere a flute plays again, lower now, as if it too is preparing to sleep. As you reach the courtyard, your sister is folding cloth. The baby is asleep again, curled beside her on a mat. A single oil lamp burns near the wall, casting a circle of golden light around her hands. She looks up and smiles. "Almost time to eat." You sit across from her, folding your legs beneath you. The warmth of the fire still lingers on the earth. The smell of bitter leaf stew is thick in the air, mingling with smoke and the sweet tang of fermenting palm wine. You rest your hands on your knees, breathing slowly. Today was not extraordinary. No great moment, no sharp turning, but it was full of quiet motion, of clay and water, of rivers and leaves, full of conversation that settled softly into the chest, and laughter that curled through the air like smoke from an evening fire. And that, you think, is enough. You lean back against the wall, eyes tracing the patterns of stars above. The world is still turning. The clay bells will hang again tomorrow. But for now, you listen and rest. The bowl of the sky has turned deep indigo, like a cloth soaked in dye and laid flat against the firmament. Stars are beginning to arrive, first in twos and threes, then in soft, scattered clusters. Some blink slowly, while others glow as if remembering fire. The moon is low on the horizon now, pale and round, rising like a silent drum over the tree line. Its light spills across the village rooftops, catching on the thatch and the curves of clay walls like water poured from a calm hand. You sit beneath the awning, your knees drawn up, a woven cloth draped around your shoulders. The air has cooled. The breeze moves more easily now, slipping into the courtyard with a softness that carries the scent of ashes, palm oil, and drying herbs. The stew pot has been emptied. The fire has burned low, its glow resting beneath a fine sheet of gray ash. Your sister has gone inside to lay the baby down. The child had fussed briefly, then quieted with the familiar comfort of breath and lullaby. Now all is still. A few embers crackle near the base of the hearth, their warmth faint but steady. You stretch your legs and let your hand rest in the dust, tracing small spirals with your fingertips. A voice calls softly from the path. Are you still awake? You turn and see Ade approaching, his frame lit faintly by the moonlight. His wrapper is tied loosely at his waist, and his steps are slow, careful not to disturb the night. He carries nothing in his hands, just his presence, like a rhythm without drum. You nod and motion him to sit. He settles beside you on the low bench, folding his legs beneath him and brushing the dust from the hem of his cloth. He glances up at the sky. It's clear tonight, he says quietly, the kind of night where stories come. You smile, then tell one. He leans back, resting on his elbows, his gaze still on the stars. My grandfather once told me about a bell maker who could shape clay so thin, the wind would sink through it before it hardened. They say he made only 12 in his life, and each one sounded like a different season. Rain, harmattan, the dry heat before planting, the first wind that brings fruit. You listen as he speaks. His voice is low and thoughtful, like someone remembering a tune they once heard in a dream. They say when the last bell rang, he buried it beneath the roots of an Irako tree and never spoke again. You tilt your head. Why? Ade shrugs. Some say he heard too much. Others say the last sound reminded him of something he'd lost. You both fall quiet. The wind moves through the courtyard, stirring the clay bells you strung weeks ago beneath the rafters. For a moment, one of them sways. A soft chime follows, high and delicate, like the memory of a voice rather than the voice itself. You close your eyes and listen. When you open them again, the moon has risen further, casting longer shadows across the compound. The shapes of the huts are softened by its glow, edges blurred like water lines on old cloth. You feel the night settling around you like a second skin. I used to be afraid of the night, you say softly. Ade turns toward you, waiting. When I was younger, traveling alone, the dark felt endless, like it could swallow the road. He nods. But now it feels like a roof, you say, like something holding everything together. You both sit quietly for a while longer. In the distance, someone coughs. Then silence again. The village is gone still. Ade rises and dusts off his hands. I should go. My mother will wonder. You nod and stand with him. He pauses before he leaves. Do you think clay remembers the hands that shape it? He asks. You look at your palms, still faintly stained from the work of the day. Maybe, you say, or maybe it forgets and becomes what it needs to be. He smiles, and for a moment, there's something unspoken between you. Not a question, not a promise, just something quiet and real. Then he turns and disappears into the moonlit path. You remain in the courtyard a little longer, watching the night stretch across the sky. A few bats flit past the rooftops. The clay bells are still again, their curves catching the light in silence. When you finally stand, your legs feel heavy but content. The day has filled you, not with urgency, but with presence. You walk slowly into the sleeping space, lifting the curtain and stepping onto the woven mat inside. Your sister is already lying down. The baby breathes softly in the crook of her arm. The room smells of smoke and cloth and earth. A low-oil lamp flickers near the wall, casting soft amber light across the floor. You place your cloth beside your sleeping mat and sit down cross-legged for a moment, letting your body adjust to the coolness of the clay floor beneath you. You think of the lids you shaped this morning, drying in the shade. You think of Baba Ode's words, of Ade's indigo-stained hands. You think of the sound the bell made just before the stars came. There is no rush to sleep. The village is silent, but it is not empty. It breathes with you. It dreams beside you. You lie down, drawing the cloth over your shoulders. The mat is warm from the day's heat, and the night air slides in gently through the woven screen above the door. A cricket sings in the distance. A lizard scratches along the wall, then stills. Outside, the moon continues to climb, steady and pale. The palm fronds rustle once more, then quiet, and in that silence you rest. You do not think of tomorrow, only of now, only of night, only of breath. The rain had passed before dawn, leaving the palace courtyard damp and heavy with the smell of wet earth and crushed leaves. The air hung low, as if waiting. Above, the sky was streaked with clouds that had not yet chosen whether to stay or drift away. The light was soft, almost bruised, filtering down through the tall walls of the royal compound and catching on the fine dew that clung to the carved pillars and woven mats. Sengo sat in the veranda shade, legs folded beneath him, a gourd of water resting near his side. His body was still, but his thoughts moved like wind beneath the surface of a pond, quiet, unseen, but constant. The double-headed axe lay across his lap, its carved handle smooth from years of ritual handling. He had no need to hold it tightly. The symbol did the holding for him. He was not yet the elephant in this moment, not to the world outside the gates, not to the waiting council who would arrive with petitions and quiet arguments. Here in the early silence, he was simply Sengo, son of Aramian, husband to 3 wives, keeper of a restive throne. A servant passed by the doorway and lowered his head without speaking. The rustle of his bare feet against the wet clay faded quickly, like a thought the mind chooses not to keep. In the distance, a bell rang. One of the shrine keepers had begun the morning rituals, libation, prayer, fire. The sound was thin and silver, carrying across the courtyards like breath on a cold morning. It reminded Sengo of the bells his mother used to wear at her ankles when she danced in the courtyard during the dry season. He had not thought of her in weeks, perhaps months. Memory, like thunder, sometimes arrived without warning. A drop of water fell from the thatch above and landed near his foot. He watched it spread, absorbed slowly into the earth. The palace around him was waking, but he did not rise. He liked this hour, the space between rest and responsibility, when the air was filled only with possibility. In that hour, he was not a king, nor a god. He was just a man listening to the breath of his compound. Behind him, from the sleeping chambers, came the soft rustle of Osen's footsteps. She moved like river water, silent but never unnoticed. She stepped into the light, hair wrapped in golden cloth, and crouched beside the hearth without a word. Her fingers reached for the firestones, stacking them in the old rhythm taught to her by women long gone. Sengo turned his head slightly. "You rise early," he said. She smiled without looking at him. "The yam does not pound itself." He watched her in silence for a while. There was a grace to her movements, not the grace of ceremony, but of practice. She had always been the one who worked without needing to be seen. Oyo was fire, Oba was storm, but Osen was the quiet stream that wore down the stone. Outside, 2 guards passed beneath the archway. Their sandals made soft sounds against the stone. They carried no weapons in hand, only short staffs marked with white cloth, a sign of peace within the walls. Sengo nodded to them as they passed. One of the men, young, perhaps no more than 16, held his chin too high. He would learn. Osen poured water into a small pot and placed it above the growing fire. The steam rose quickly, bringing with it the scent of herbs and the sharp tang of iron. She added a few strands of dried leaf. then wiped her hands on her wrapper and sat beside the post, eyes resting on the embers. "Will the Oyomesi speak today?" she asked softly. He nodded. "They bring questions." "They always bring questions," she replied, "but not always the ones that need answers." He allowed himself a quiet smile. Osen had a way of saying things that landed gently, but stayed in the mind long after. He thought of the council, 7 men, each with his own weight, each with a village or a lineage at his back. They spoke in layered tones, never fully naming what they meant. And yet, they could strip a king of his crown with a gesture, if the signs aligned. Power, Sengo had learned, was never truly held. It moved, like thunder, like fire, like the people themselves. When he had taken the throne, he had thought of rule as a kind of flame, bright, focused, consuming. But now, years into his reign, he understood it more as water, always shifting, always needing a vessel, and dangerous only when misunderstood. He rose at last and walked into the light of the courtyard. The sky had begun to clear. Blue peeked through the clouds like the first cloth pulled from a dye bath, pale, uncertain, but promising color to come. The courtyard was large, lined with carved posts and painted clay walls. In the center stood the talking drum, resting on its wooden stand, wrapped in skin and meaning. A boy sat beside it, preparing to carry it to the shrine. He looked up at Sengo, startled, then quickly lowered his eyes. Sengo walked past him, one hand brushing the edge of the drum's frame. He remembered playing that drum as a child, long before duty had found him. The weight of it against his chest, the rhythm deep in his bones. Back then, his world had been smaller, simpler. A courtyard, a father with strong hands, a mother who sang in the evenings, sisters who braided his hair, laughter that reached the rafters. Now, the laughter came more softly, hidden beneath layers of protocol and respect. In the hall beyond the courtyard, the council would be gathering soon. Basharan would speak first, as he always did, his voice measured, his eyes always watching for what remained unsaid. The others would follow. The matters today were not unfamiliar: border unrest, tribute delays, omens red in cracked tortoise shells. But Sengo was not thinking of these yet. He stood beneath the great fig tree at the edge of the courtyard, its leaves trembling slightly in the breeze. Birds rustled in the branches, shifting like thoughts before speech. The tree had been planted generations ago, before the first palace was built. It had seen more kings than it could name, more storms than it had leaves. He rested one hand against its trunk, feeling the texture of age beneath his palm. Here, in this moment, he was not the god of thunder, not the firebringer of stories, not even the warrior of Noop campaigns. He was simply a man beneath a tree, listening to the silence before a storm. A servant approached quietly and bowed. "They are ready, Aliphan." He nodded, then turned once more to glance at the sky. It was clearing now. A soft wind stirred the hem of his cloth. The axe still hung at his side, balanced and waiting. He stepped forward, not hurriedly, but with the calm of someone who knows the ground beneath him and who has felt the sky watch him for a very long time. Inside the hall, the Oyomesi would wait, but for now the tree still stood. The courtyard still breathed, and the bell, in some distant part of the palace, began to ring again, low, steady, like a whisper too old to end. The afternoon heat had softened by the time Sengo stepped out of the council hall. The floor beneath his feet was warm, but no longer burning. The air carried the scent of roasted yam, fresh ink from the scribe's quarters, and the faint remains of incense left smoldering near the ancestral shrine. The council had gone as expected. Discussions moved slowly, like a river blocked by reeds. Voices rose and fell, not with anger, but with caution. As always, Basharan had spoken last. His words were balanced, his silences even more so. When the final gourd of palm wine had been poured and shared, Sengo had stood, nodded once, and left without ceremony. He crossed the upper courtyard alone. His palace, like most things in Oyo, was built for function, then adorned with grace. Red clay walls kept the heat at bay. Inner passageways bent at quiet angles. Roofs sloped with the curve of collected rain. In some corners, mosaic floors glimmered with fragments of broken pots. They caught the light in a way that felt like memory. Sango passed a doorway where two boys practiced a talking drum. Their rhythm was steady, though uneven in its phrasing. They did not see him. That pleased him more than they might have guessed. He continued on toward the inner compound, the women's quarters, not out of impulse, but from rhythm. He had promised to visit, and promises, even small ones, carried weight. The door to Osen's chamber was half open. She sat near the center mat, peeling citrus fruit in slow, even strokes. The scent drifted easily through the room, clean, sharp, and slightly sweet. A basin of water rested at her side. A folded cloth sat on her lap. She did not look up when he entered. That was her way. He lowered himself beside her without speaking. The silence between them was not heavy. It had the texture of understanding, like the silence shared between two people who had heard the same rain fall many times. She offered him a slice of the fruit. He took it and bit into the flesh, the juice cold on his tongue. "You're quiet," she said. "They spoke much today," he answered. "I have little left." She placed the rind carefully into the basin. "And did they say anything worth carrying?" Sango considered. "They want the same thing. Security, respect, control. None of it new." Osen nodded. The same yam peeled again. He almost smiled. Her words often felt like proverbs, but she never delivered them with flair. They arrived plainly, wrapped in the cloth of daily life. She picked up a comb and began to untwist the ends of her hair. He watched the motion for a moment. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She paused. "Regret what?" "This life, this place, being one of three." She turned to him then, eyes soft but clear. "Do you?" He looked down at the orange peel in his hand, now drying at the edges. "I don't know." She returned to her combing. "There are days," she said slowly, "when I think I might have found more peace beside the river, selling herbs, stirring soap with my mother. And now," she lifted one shoulder, just slightly, "now I stir other things." He let the silence settle again. Osen was not jealous, not in the way court gossip imagined. Nor was she simple. She was, perhaps, the only one who had never asked him to be more than what he was. He rose after a while, setting the peel into the basin. "I should see Oya." Osen did not object. She reached for another orange. He stepped into the corridor, where the light had dimmed. Evening was approaching. The palace took on a different mood at that hour, softer, more inward. The guards changed shifts. Kitchen workers hushed their chatter. The scent of cooked grains drifted from the west kitchen. Oya's quarters were less orderly than Osen's. More smoke, more sound. Even the colors were louder, reds and deep golds, draped over beams and scattered across mats. When he entered, she was sharpening a blade. She glanced up, her eyes keen. "You remembered." "I said I would." She stood and wiped the blade on a cloth. "The blade has a notch," she said. "I can't decide whether to file it or let it speak." He raised an eyebrow. "Speak to whom?" "To time," she said simply. "Everything dulls eventually, even thunder." Sango stepped further into the room, noting the disarray. Half-folded wrappers, an overturned stool, a basket of dried peppers that had spilled across the floor. "You've been restless again." She snorted. "Rest is for those who have not tasted battle." He did not argue. He had seen her fight once, during the border unrest near Ketu. Her arms had moved with fire. Her voice had shaken the men to stillness. And yet, here she was, watching the sun fall between slats of reed window, blade in hand, wondering whether to mend or preserve its wound. He sat down and leaned back against the wall. The clay was warm. "You think I've grown dull?" She considered, then shook her head. "No, just quieter. But quiet can be louder than you think. There was no teasing in her voice, just observation. He stayed for a little while longer, listening to her rearrange the scattered baskets and clear space near the doorway. They didn't speak again. Some conversations needed only presence. When he left, the sky was low with color. Purple and gold bled together at the edges, and the first stars hesitated at the rim of dusk. The final visit would be Oba. Her quarters were furthest from the center, not by design, but by choice. Oba had asked for stillness, for distance from the drums and voices. When he arrived, she was weaving. She looked up and smiled gently. "Come." He sat near the woven mat, watching her fingers move across the strands. "You're the only one still weaving cloth," he said. "The others buy theirs." She nodded. "Yes, but I prefer to know where each thread came from." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Have you found what you were looking for here?" Oba did not answer quickly. She tied one knot, then two. "I came to the palace because I was told to," she said. "But I stayed because I wanted to know if a heart could remain soft inside these walls." "And has it?" Oba looked up, her gaze calm. "I don't know," she said, "but I still dream." He thought about that on the walk back. 3 women, 3 reflections. None identical, none simple. They had shaped his days more than he admitted. Each, in their way, had taught him to listen, not to words, but to quiet. In the outer courtyard, the clay bells stirred faintly in the wind. He paused beneath them, feeling their presence without touch. The palace was resting now. Fires were small, voices low. He looked toward the horizon. The sky had darkened fully, but in its darkness, it offered clarity. In the stillness, things were easier to see. And in the quiet, he remembered who he was before the fire, before the axe, before the throne. Not a god, not even a king, just a man watching the stars rise, hoping to leave behind something that would not break when silence came. It did not happen all at once. There was no ceremony, no grand announcement, no burst of fire or rolling thunder to mark the change. The world remained quiet, as it often does when something lasting begins. The memory of Elephant Sango, like most things, began in small ways. A drum rhythm altered slightly. A prayer whispered more often than before. A child given a name with weight that echoed. He was still alive when it started. That was the part that made it strange, though no one said so aloud. In the dry season of his 6th year on the throne, the clouds had refused to gather. The rain stayed inland. The earth cracked along the yam fields, and the rivers thinned at the edges. The farmers spoke quietly, then more urgently. Tribute delivery slowed. Drought, like silence, has a way of shifting power without needing to speak. Sango listened, as he always had, but something in him had begun to lean inward. His words were fewer, his presence more distant. Not in location, but in spirit. He walked the palace grounds at night, alone. Even Oya did not follow. The guards grew used to the sound of his sandals in the dark, the faint scrape of heel on stone, the pause beneath the fig tree, the stillness outside the ancestral shrine. He did not ask for omens. He did not call for diviners. He did not perform the storm rituals that had once made the people cheer in reverence. Instead, he watched the sky. Each night, without explanation. Perhaps he was waiting for rain. Perhaps he was listening for something he could no longer hear. In the town square, people began to speak differently. Not unkindly, not with rebellion, but with distance. The elephant dreams too long, someone murmured near a calabash stall. His thoughts are in the sky, another replied. It is not for us to understand the wind, said a third, and the others nodded. Respect remained, but it had begun to shift. It no longer rested on presence. It was becoming legend. In the courtyard where children played, one boy tied 2 small gourds to a stick and called it the thunder axe. He raised it in the air and shouted to the clouds, laughing. His grandmother clapped once and told him to lower his voice. "That is not for games," she said. "That belongs to the sky." He lowered the stick, eyes wide. The name Sango did not sound like a name anymore. It sounded like a season. At the shrine, the keepers cleaned the altar more often. They lit the lamps earlier, burned the herbs longer. When asked why, they offered no explanation. Only quiet glances and steady hands. Even the priests, in their prayers, began to speak as though Sango were already part of the line of Orisha, present but not seated, close but not held. The change moved like dusk, slow, sure, inevitable. Inside the palace, Sango remained. He did not resist the change, nor did he shape it. He simply stepped aside from it, as if sensing that a man cannot remain a man forever in the eyes of those who need something larger. Osun watched him with a kind of sadness, not pity, just knowing. She had seen the way his silence lengthened. She had heard the shift in his breathing when he sat beneath the fig tree. He was still near, but not quite touchable. Oya refused to change her manner. She still argued with him, still laughed when he said nothing, still sharpened her blades near the fire as though war might return with the rain. Oba, for her part, began weaving longer cloths. Quiet, dense patterns that she folded and stored without use. When asked what they were for, she simply said, "Something to carry memory." The Oyomesi said little. They held council as before, spoke of trade, of law, of tribute, but their eyes moved more often to Basharan, and Basharan's words grew longer, more measured. He invoked the ancestors more frequently, invoked tradition with firmer breath. In the 7th year, the rain came late, but it came. Still, the people remained cautious. Their respect had shifted into reverence, a subtle difference. Reverence makes space. Respect listens. Reverence waits. That was the year the thunder came with no storm. A tree near the outer gate was struck. No lightning, no cloud, no sound before it fell. The villagers came to see. They whispered. "It is a sign," said one. "It is Sango," said another. Inside the palace, Sango said nothing. He walked out to the broken tree and stood beside it. He placed his hand on the cracked bark. Then he turned and walked back into the palace. No one followed. The next morning, the shrine was crowded. Offerings were left without prompting. Red cloth, white beads, yam, cola, palm oil, bells made of clay and copper. Children were brought forward. Names were spoken with care. The name Sango no longer belonged to the man alone. It had begun to belong to meaning. He remained in the palace. He did not argue. He did not correct them. His footsteps grew softer, his gaze longer. One morning, Osun entered his chamber to find him seated, his axe resting across his lap. He looked at her and said, "They no longer see me." She knelt beside him. "They do," she replied, "but differently." He nodded, then closed his eyes. She stayed with him until the lamp burned low. He did not vanish in the way legends often claim. There was no lightning bolt, no swallowed sky, no rising into clouds. Instead, one morning, he was simply not in his chamber. The axe remained, his wrapper folded. The air held a stillness that had not been there before. The guard searched. The inner courtyards were walked in silence. The fig tree stood undisturbed. No one found him. The Oyomesi met at dawn. Basharan spoke. They did not call him dead. They called him gone. And then they called him more. The shrine was renamed. The drums changed. The prayers shifted. Alifin Sango became something else. Not lost. Not erased. Just beyond reach. Like the sound of rain remembered during the dry season. In the village of Omu, word arrived by traveler. A boy told the potter's apprentice that the Thunder King had become thunder itself. The potter said nothing, only placed a clay bell near the shrine. The apprentice hung another near the river path, where wind often passed, but rarely paused. Over time, the stories came. Sango the Thunderer, Sango the Lightning, Sango who speaks through flame and axe. Children learned the rhythm of his chant. Women offered cola at his name. Dancers moved in red and white, arms outstretched, feet beating a memory into the ground. But inside the palace, some remembered the man who walked softly, who listened more than he spoke, who sat beneath a fig tree and watched the stars rise without asking for their names. That memory remained, quiet, still, a rhythm too slow for drumming, a shape too soft for carving, but it remained, in wind, in breath, in the silence after a bell rings. It was difficult to say exactly how long it had been since Sango last walked the earth. The sun still rose in the same rhythm. The rains came when they were ready. The winds moved across the grasslands in their slow, slanted way. Life, as it always had, moved forward. And yet, something lingered in the spaces between things, unspoken but understood. In the village of Omu, children learned his name before they learned the name of the nearest river. Not because anyone forced it, but because the syllables came easily, like breath. Sango, spoken low during prayers, spoken loudly during celebration, sung even by young girls sweeping courtyards at dawn. There was no image of him carved in stone, no statue placed in the center of the square. His presence was softer than that, less about what could be seen, more about what could be felt. A potter named Olenii kept a small bell on the shelf beside his kiln. It was not fancy, just a round shape of clay, carved with the faint impression of a double axe. He never rang it, but each time he shaped a vessel and set it to dry. He nodded toward it, not in worship, not in ritual, just in memory. That was enough. In the shrine near the forest edge, the priestess lit the fire, as she always had. She spoke the names of the Orisha, Ogun, Obatala, Yamoja, and then paused before the final one. Sango. Her tone never changed, but her silence before the name made the flame flicker a little longer. She poured palm oil into the lamp and moved her hand over the smoke. The children watching nearby imitated the gesture, eyes wide but calm. At the market, when clouds gathered without warning, no one panicked. People looked up, nodded once, and said, "He is near." No one asked who. It was not a question. One morning, a traveler came from the north. His cloak was dusty and his sandals thin. He sat near the well, wiping his brow with a leaf. A group of elders approached, as they always did when someone new arrived. They asked his name, his origin, his trade. He answered politely. Then he asked, "Is it true that thunder speaks here?" The elders exchanged glances. One replied, "Thunder speaks everywhere, but here we remember how to listen." The traveler stayed 2 days, bought a clay bell, and left without asking again. In the palace at Oyo, generations had come and gone. The throne still stood. The council still met. The fig tree near the courtyard still grew, its roots wider, its branches slower to bend. But the air beneath it was known to be stiller than the rest. Children avoided playing there, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Birds landed on its limbs less often. On the first market day after the full moon, dancers gathered in the open square. They wore cloth dyed in red and white. Their movements were measured, sharp turns followed by stillness, arms raised, then dropped like leaves. A drummer sat in the corner. He played a rhythm passed down, not from text, but from breath. His teacher had taught him by clapping once, pausing, and then speaking. Not fast, not loud, but clear. The dancer in the center was a woman named Ioka. She was not tall, and she did not speak often. But when she moved, the elders watched with still eyes. Her balance was quiet. Her gestures were not wide, but her steps carried something ancient. After the final movement, she stood motionless. A child clapped. Then an elder stood and said, "The air remembers." No one replied. Later, in her hut, Ioka removed her cloth and hung it carefully. She sat beside the small altar in the corner, lit a lamp, and placed her hands on her knees. She had never seen Sango, but she had felt the earth grow warm beneath her feet while dancing. That was enough. Near the river, a young boy carved a toy axe from palm wood. He smoothed the handle with a stone, then placed 2 pebbles at either end. When he held it, it bent slightly. He frowned. His grandmother, watching from a stool, called out gently, "Balance matters." The boy turned, curious. "Like a real axe?" he asked. She nodded. "Like justice." The boy nodded once, then began again. At the edge of the village, near the place where old pots were buried beneath tree roots, a group of girls gathered cassava leaves. One pointed to the sky. A bird was circling, broad wings, silent movement. Another girl said, "That's his messenger." The first one asked, "How do you know?" She shrugged. "My mother says the sky never forgets." The girls did not argue. They continued picking leaves, but their hands moved more slowly after that. In time, a festival was declared, not by decree, but by rhythm. People brought calabashes filled with yam and cola. The drummers came without being asked. The dancers arrived before anyone called them. The children ran between feet, laughing. The elders stood at the edges, leaning on staffs, remembering. A man offered a carved bell to the shrine. A woman placed a bowl of bitter leaf beside it. No one shouted. No one preached. The fire was lit. The palm wine passed. The night came softly, and in the wind, someone thought they heard a name. Not shouted, not declared, just carried. The clay bells near the rafters moved slightly. The rain did not fall, but the air changed. And somewhere in the stillness between a drumbeat and a breath, the village remembered again. The bells are not spoken of often, not out of fear, and not because they are forbidden, but because they belong to something older than story, older even than question. They are part of the background, like wind through woven rooftops, like the taste of ash in morning stew, like the feeling that someone once stood behind you when no one did. They are not hidden, but they are not explained. The field remains quiet, and life continues. In the village, morning begins as it always has. Fires are coaxed from sleeping embers. Calabashes are rinsed in water that smells faintly of clay. A rooster calls from somewhere beyond the banana grove, and footsteps move slowly across the compound, stirring up a soft breath of dust. Near the shrine, the priestess pours oil into a shallow bowl. Her hands move with practiced rhythm. She does not glance toward the bell field, but she nods in its direction once, gently, as if remembering something without needing to name it. A young girl named Morant wakes early. She sweeps the courtyard with a bundle of dry grass bound by twine. The sound it makes against the earth is soft and repetitive, like breath. She does not look at the field as she works, but her sweep slows when the wind shifts. Her grandmother, seated on a stool nearby, hums to herself as she grinds pepper in a stone bowl. The scent rises into the air, sharp and earthy, mingling with smoke and the faint sweetness of ripening plantain. She pauses mid-grind and says quietly, "The bells are listening today." Morant does not answer. She does not ask what her grandmother means. She just keeps sweeping. Later that day, under the shade of an udala tree, 2 boys play a game with seeds. They dig shallow circles into the earth and flick the seeds between them with smooth pebbles. The rhythm is quick, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the rustle of grass as they shift their weight. One boy pauses, pointing toward the hills. "That path there. It goes near the bells," he says. The other nods, then flicks a seed into a circle. "My uncle says they used to ring all night," he replies. "But now they only ring when no one is listening." They say it the way children speak of clouds, or rivers, or the sound of bees, as though it is simply part of how the world works. The sun moves across the sky. The shadows change. Work continues. At the dye pit near the river's bend, the cloth makers lay out strips of blue fabric in the sun. The color deepens slowly with air and time. An older man, with hands stained the color of midnight, tells a boy to fold the edges inward, tighter. Let it hold its silence, he says. He points to the sky, where clouds are gathering. If the rain comes, listen carefully. You may hear more than thunder. The boy frowns, but he folds the cloth. In the afternoon, a woman comes to the edge of the field. She carries a small basket of herbs. She does not cross the line where the grass grows thicker. She kneels just beside it and places the basket down. She touches one of the leaves inside, then stands and walks away. She does not turn back. No one asks who she was. No one needs to. In the cool shade of the pottery grove, where red earth waits in shallow bowls, and the air smells of wet clay and pine smoke, a potter smooths the rim of a new vessel. His hands are quiet and slow, shaping a line that curves inward like the lip of a story not yet told. He pauses, not because something is wrong, but because something is present. He looks up toward the west. The field is not visible from where he sits, but his fingers, without thinking, shape the next pot with a narrower base and a rounder mouth. He does not say why. Near the stream, girls gather water in carved gourds. One dips her hand into the current, watches the ripples move outward. Another leans closer, listening to the bubbling flow. It sounds different today, she says. Her friend lifts her head, listening, like a song with no words. Neither of them laugh. They carry the water back without speaking again. As the sun begins to lean low across the trees, the wind changes. It is a soft wind, the kind that moves leaves without rustling them, the kind that carries scent without stirring dust. Someone says the bells are stirring again. Someone else says nothing, but lifts their eyes. A dog sleeps near the edge of the compound, ears flicking once, then still. In the evening, just before the last light fades from the sky, an elder sits on a low bench and combs her hair with slow, practiced movements. Her granddaughter sits nearby, braiding a strip of raffia into a bracelet. Tell me again, the girl says, about the time you heard the bell ring your name. The elder does not speak right away. She places the comb beside her and smooths her wrapper. Then she says, "It was after the yam harvest. I was carrying a basket of roots past the field. The sun was strong. The wind was quiet, but one bell, just one, made a sound." The girl waits. "And then?" she asks. The elder shrugs. "Then it stopped." The girl frowns. "Was it your name?" The elder smiles, just a little. "It was close." They sit in silence. The lamp beside them flickers. In the sky, the stars begin to appear, slowly, one by one, like answers that do not explain. The field rests. The bells rest. And yet, something remains in the air. A weight that is not heavy. A name that is not said. A rhythm that is not measured. Only the wind knows where it begins. Only the dust remembers how it ends. There was once a woman in Omu who shaped clay the way others carried stories. Her name was Aranola, but most simply called her daughter of fire. Not because of any heat in her manner, but because her hands were always warm. Warm from the kiln. Warm from memory. Warm from holding things too delicate for words. She lived near the grove where the earth was soft and good, where the clay pulled from the banks of the stream came out rich and dark, with veins of pale silt woven through it like forgotten thread. It was the same place her mother had worked, and her grandmother before that. The path to her compound curved slightly at the end, like the rim of a bowl not quite finished. She did not speak often, but when she did, her words moved slowly, like hands smoothing the edge of a vessel. Not fast, not careless, just steady. Each morning, she opened the workshop doors just after sunrise. The smell of ash and wet soil hung in the air. The birds were still speaking to one another in broken phrases, and the goats had not yet begun to test the fences. Aranola's first gesture was always the same. She walked to the shelf near the back of the room, lifted a small round stone from its place, and turned it once in her palm. It was smooth and worn, not much bigger than a kola nut, but heavy for its size. Her mother had given it to her when she was a child, saying only, "Keep this close when the clay forgets what it is." She had never asked what that meant. She simply used it, always for finishing, never for shaping. When the walls of a vessel were ready, when the rim had been formed and the surface needed only quiet, she would hold the stone and press it against the clay in gentle circles, not to change the form, only to help it remember its own curve. No one else in the village used a stone like that. Other potters had paddles, scrapers, flat boards, some polished with leaves or bone. But Aranola used a stone. She never spoke of where it came from, but it had a reddish tint, and a faint ridge along one side, like something once carved had worn away. When her daughter, Kemi, turned 11, Aranola began to let her sit beside her at the bench. Kemi was quick with her hands and quiet with her questions. She liked the coolness of fresh clay, the smell of water and dust mixing together. She watched everything, how her mother pinched the base of a cup, how she smoothed the seam of a jar with her thumb, how she listened to the pot before turning it. But what she watched most was the stone. "How do you know when to use it?" she asked one day. Aranola paused. She held up a small bowl that was nearly finished. The shape was simple, the edges soft. "Feel this," she said. Kemi reached out and touched the surface. It felt smooth enough. "It's finished," Kemi said. Aranola smiled slightly. "Not yet." She pressed the stone once against the side of the bowl. A soft curve, a slow breath. Then she handed it back. Kemi felt the change, not in texture, but in tone. The bowl had not shifted in shape, but it had settled, like a breath that had found its rhythm. She said nothing. Aranola nodded. That's when, over time, Kemi learned more. That some days the stone worked better in the early morning. That some clay needed more silence before being touched. That if she was worried or hurried, the bowl would resist her. The stone did not solve mistakes. It only listened to them. One season, after a long rain, the kiln cracked. A seam along the base opened, just enough to let heat escape. The pots baked unevenly. Aranola sat for a long time beside the fire that night, watching the flames, not trying to fix them. In the morning, she took the stone from the shelf and carried it to the edge of the field. Not the bell field, a smaller one, just beyond the last house. She placed the stone on a flat rock and sat beside it. She did not move for a long time. Then she stood, picked it up again, and returned to her bench. That day, she made only one pot. It was smaller than usual and slightly uneven, but she finished it and gave it away. No one asked why. Years passed. Kemi became taller, her hands stronger. She began to shape her own vessels, not as her mother did, but not differently either. She found her own rhythm, but the stone remained on the shelf. Until one morning, Aranola did not open the workshop. She had not fallen ill. She had not left. She was simply quiet, as if something had closed gently, like a lid fitted just right. Kemi sat beside her that evening and watched the light fall across the clay bowls on the bench. Some were dry, some still soft. She reached for the stone, turned it once in her hand, and set it on the rim of an unfinished pot. She did not press. She did not speak. She let rest there. The next morning, she opened the workshop doors. The birds were louder that day, the sun slower to rise. She shaped only 3 vessels, each one wide at the mouth, with curved sides that leaned slightly inward, like someone holding a secret. Before finishing each, she held the stone, but did not use it. Not yet. The stone would know when, and if it didn't, the clay would remind her, as it always had. By mid-afternoon, the palace was quieter than the village beyond its walls. Not silent, not ever silent, but quiet in the way thick curtains make a room seem smaller than it is. The sounds that came, footsteps on worn stone, the clink of polished bowls being stacked, the soft murmur of attendants confirming schedules, did not rise. They hovered just above the floor, like smoke that had forgotten where it was meant to go. In her chamber, the woman sat beneath the window that faced the western wall. The air was warmer now. The sun had begun its long stretch toward the trees. It painted a stripe of gold across the floor, touching the hem of her wrapper and the tips of her fingers. In front of her was a small tray holding 3 items: a folded note, a slice of dried plantain, and a carved comb made from dark wood. None of these belonged together, but they had been placed that way carefully, arranged by a hand trained to make everything appear intentional, a habit of the palace. As if symmetry could protect meaning from fading, the note was unopened, the plantain slightly brittle. The comb was not hers. She had many like it, but not this one. The handle bore a mark, a spiral, not quite round, not quite straight. She traced it once, then let her hand fall. The afternoon stretched. In another part of the palace, someone was practicing speech. Not conversation, not song, a speech. It would be delivered later in the week at a meeting of notables, concerning harvests or couriers, or a ceremonial gift from a coastal chief. The subject was unimportant. What mattered was rhythm, breath, the correct pauses, the illusion of spontaneity. The man reciting it spoke slowly, as instructed. He stood near a shaded colonnade and read aloud, then listened to himself. Occasionally, he repeated a phrase with a different inflection. The servants nearby continued their work without acknowledging him. It was said that the palace trained its speakers like dancers. Each word was to land not where it fit best, but where it would be most remembered. The woman by the window closed her eyes. She remembered a time when she had been asked to speak. Just once, years ago. It had been a farewell ceremony for a relative she barely knew. The words had been written for her, inscribed in black ink on folded cloth. She had recited them exactly as shown. The crowd had listened. Someone had wept. Someone else had clapped too early. Afterward, a steward had praised her tone. She remembered none of the words, only the faint smell of camphor, and the heaviness of the necklace she had worn that day. She opened her eyes again. The clay bell was still on the table. She had not moved it. It did not ring. It did not shift. It did not ask for attention. Like many things in the palace, it simply remained. Across the courtyard, a maidservant carried a folded mat from one veranda to another. She held it with both hands, careful not to let it bend, not because it was delicate, but because it had been declared formal. And things that were declared formal had to be handled as if they were sacred. The mat would not be used. It would be laid out, admired, and returned, like the cushions embroidered with copper thread, or the beaded shoes worn only for processions and never for walking, or the carved bowl that held no food, only perfume resin. That was the rhythm here. Things were made, displayed, replaced, like gestures, like greetings, like names. The woman rose from her seat and stepped into the corridor. The tiles beneath her feet were smooth from generations of footsteps, still warm from the sun, but cooling quickly. She moved through a long passage with painted walls, murals of battles, ceremonies, and mythical animals whose names had slipped from common knowledge. Each painting had been retouched 3 times in her memory. She recognized the same scenes, but the colors had changed. The sky in one was now green. In another, the hero spear was gone, replaced with a fan. No one mentioned the changes. That, too, was part of the order. She entered a side chamber with high windows. This room was used for receiving minor visitors. It was not the grand hall, but it was grand enough. A large chair stood at one end, carved from thick wood. It was inlaid with brass studs and dyed cloth. Not comfortable, just impressive. She sat. The cushion beneath her shifted with a soft sigh. A steward entered, bowed, and placed a scroll on the table beside her. The current record of names, as requested, he said. She nodded once. He stepped back, then left. She did not open the scroll. She had asked for it days ago, out of habit more than need. It listed births, marriages, and contributions to the palace from the surrounding villages. Names written in looping script. Some familiar, most not. The list would be added to another list, which would be stored in the archive chamber. The chamber was dry and dim, lined with clay jars and wrapped scrolls. No one entered often, but the records were kept in case they were ever needed. They rarely were. Still, they were copied, updated, resealed. She remained in the chair for a while longer, listening to the light shift across the floor. Dust moved in the air, catching the last sun in pale arcs. Her eyes followed the drift of it. She imagined the dust remembered more than the scrolls did. It had touched skin, bowls, wood, and cloth. It had lived on the surfaces of things, not above them. Eventually she rose, returned to her chamber. The clay bell had not moved. She lifted it again, felt its shape in her palm. Then, without ringing it, placed it inside the porcelain bowl. She covered the bowl with cloth and turned away. Outside, the lamps were being lit. The wind carried the scent of charcoal and orange leaf. And in the sky, a thin line of cloud glowed at its edge. Another day would follow, with new arrangements, new courtesies, new silences. But this one had ended, with a bell that made no sound, and a memory she did not need to name. The idea had come during a long meeting, one of the quieter ones, held in the shade of the veranda, where low voices floated between carved beams and brass fans turned without urgency. The steward had mentioned a village near the edge of the southern plain, Omu, or something like it, where the people had continued to send their offerings without being asked. This, apparently, was notable. They sent carved pots, bundles of groundnut, strips of dyed cloth, mostly in deep greens and browns. Nothing lavish, nothing expected, and yet the steadiness of it had earned a small line in the record. The woman had been seated near the end of the table, fanning herself with a woven paddle when she heard the name. Omu, a soft name, familiar, though she could not quite remember why. Later that day, without much thought, she instructed her attendant to prepare a gift. Nothing heavy, nothing political, just something suitable. For gratitude, the selection was quick. She had not chosen it herself, but she had described the shape and tone. A small bowl, she said, wide but shallow, something quiet in its color, with a lid if possible, something that looked as though it might have held rainwater once. The attendants returned with 3. One had a blue glaze that shimmered strangely in the sun. It was dismissed. Another had a silver rim, too formal. The third was earthen, pale at the base, dark at the top. A lid carved with a rising line that meant nothing but pleased the eye. She chose it, and into it they placed 5 cowries and a piece of scented cloth. The bowl was wrapped in layers of soft reed and tied with thread dyed in maroon. It was sent with a courier the next morning. He was instructed not to hurry, not to explain, only to deliver and bow, which he did. 3 days later, the bowl returned. It was placed on the small table beside her morning stool, still wrapped, still tied, untouched. There was no note, no explanation, only the bowl. The steward entered, slightly flustered. He said the courier had been received politely. The village elder had offered him water and roasted yam. He had been thanked. Then the bowl was handed back. No insult intended, the steward said. Only unfamiliarity. She looked at the bowl, then out the window, then at the bowl again. She lifted it, untied the thread, opened the lid. The contents were unchanged, except for one thing. Resting inside, between the cowries and the cloth, was a small clay bell. Unmarked, not hung, not explained. Just there. She said nothing. The steward waited, then bowed and left. She carried the bowl to her private chamber and placed it beside the older one, the one that had arrived weeks ago. No one had ever claimed that one either. She looked at them side by side. 2 bowls, 2 bells, one sent, one returned. It was, perhaps, a conversation. but one carried out entirely in objects. She did not laugh, but she thought about it. There was a quiet irony in the exchange. The palace gave, expecting its meaning to be received. The village replied, without rejecting or accepting, only mirroring, like two people passing on a narrow path, neither stepping forward, neither stepping aside. That night, during the evening candle ritual, she watched the flame flicker and thought of the path the courier had taken. She imagined the elder's face, polite, calm, unbothered. She imagined the quiet of the village, the rustle of cassava leaves, the sound of a bell that was never rung. And she wondered what the clay there felt like. Not the kind used in palace tiles, but the soft clay pressed beneath bare feet, unshaped, unfired, waiting for no one. Later, she placed both bowls in the same cabinet, not hidden, but not displayed. And in the morning, she did not mention them, not to the steward, not to the attendants, not even to herself. They would remain there, quiet, resting, like unfinished thoughts, like the echo of something passed from hand to hand without needing to be understood, like a question asked without needing an answer, just the shape of it, cool in the hand, warm in the remembering. And so the story softens, like light at the end of the day. The clay has cooled, the footsteps have faded, and the echoes of quiet hands still linger in the air. What once was loud with life is now remembered in quiet gestures, in the way we sit near firelight, in the rhythm of our breath, in the hush between thoughts. The people we've met tonight lived in a world both distant and familiar. They shaped bowls, swept courtyards, looked at the same moon we do. They listened for meaning in the wind, in the bells, in each other. And though they are gone, their stillness reaches us, not with answers, but with presence. Perhaps some part of them lives on in your own evening rituals, in the tea you sip, the blanket you pull closer, the silence you choose. If this story brought you a little peace tonight, you're gently invited to like, share, or subscribe, only if it feels right in your heart. And if you'd like, leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is there. It's a quiet comfort, knowing we rest together. Now let your thoughts grow slower. Let the room grow quieter. Let yourself drift. Rest well. Dream gently. And come back tomorrow for another story whispered in the dark.